بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد مفتاح باب رحمة الله عدد ما في علم الله صلاة وسلام دائمين بنوام ملك الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. يعلم أن شهوة والغضب خادمان للنفس جاذبان يحفظان أمر الطعام والشراب والنكاح لعمل الحواس، ثم النفس خادما للحواس شبكة العقل جواسيسه يبصر بها صنائع البارية. One of the great blessings that the Prophet ﷺ taught us is the blessing of having some kind of inner map. So much of the time we know, as they say, بِحُكُمِ الْفِطْرَةِ, just by almost like an instinctual quality, just an inner perception when something's not quite right or when something's innately good. But how do we interface with that reality? How do we interact? How do we understand it? How do we understand what's upon us in our interfacing of that particular thing? Is difficult, it's challenging. It's often left to ijtihad, we feel this way, we're just left to our own devices. The Prophet ﷺ, he taught us the goal and how to orientate ourselves towards the goal, and the method of how to get back to the goal, how to keep focused on the goal. And through this lens, we're able to understand something more about our own selves. We spoke last time about the importance of knowing oneself. مَنْ عَرَفَ نَفْسَهُ فَقَدْ عَرَفَ رَبَّهُ. The one that knows themselves has indeed known their Lord. And Imam al-Ghazali, he says here in the Alchemy of Happiness, كمية السعادة يعلم أن الشهوة والغضب خادمان للنفس. He says, no, he's giving us this inner map. That the shahwa, your base, primordial, almost instinctual desires, your shahwa, which typically means a lustful desire, related to a sexual desire. It could also be a shahwa al-ta'am, so kind of a lust or a love for food. It's that primordial, force within us. Wal-ghadab, and anger. Khadimani lin-nafs. He says they're in service to the ego, or to the self. They're there, they're existent for a reason, and they're there in service to the nafs. And they cause things to they pull things in for it. And through it they're able to preserve it and maintain it through eating, drinking, والنكاح لعمل الحواس, and procreation. And the nafs is ultimately subservient to the aql. These are really, really important words for mapping out the Islamic worldview of ourselves. So what is the aql? The aql, you could say, intellect, mind. But Allah says they have hearts. They don't comprehend by it. So the place of comprehension is it's not brain matter. The aql is something different. But base lust, ghadab, anger, they are in service to the ego, and the ego is ultimately service to the mind, as it's related to the senses. The senses are related to eating, tasting, but it goes back to the mind, the intellect. And through this you're able to perceive. That's when you start to get into a deeper plane of understanding. So the hawas khadim lil-aql. ثم العقل خادم للقلب. And then he says, but the mind, you could say like the raw spiritual organ which you have within you, the faculty within you to perceive and understand, ultimately is in servitude to the heart. It goes back to the heart. So all of these things go back to the heart. والقلب مخلوق لنظر جمال الحضرة الإلهية. And the ultimate purpose for the heart, for the creation of the heart, is to be present with the divine, to be present with Allah. So we've got some kind of understanding. Let's take it back. What is anger? If this is something which fuels and plugs into something deeper and goes deeper and ultimately activates our ability or lack thereof to engage with reality and ultimate reality, it's obviously something we need to be paying close attention to. So Imam al-Ghazali, he says in Ihya Ulumuddin, he compares anger, it's like a dormant flame enveloped within the heart. Dormant as in it's not quite activated. Mustakinna, it's you can't quite feel it, but it's this flame that exists within the human heart. This is obviously a metaphor. And the primary fuel for it that causes it to ignite and manifest is kibr, arrogance. So this is why also the understanding, a person that's truly humble, will not have this thing ignited. Now once again, we've got to understand everything that we're talking about here. It's like examining one of the physical organs. You can't understand the heart without understanding the brain, without understanding the lungs, without understanding the capillaries and the veins. All of these things are ultimately connected. We can only compartmentalize them, break them down, examine them for a period of just to approximate, but it's never detached from the broader inward map of our human makeup. So anger is also one of the primary causes for hatred and envy, hiqd and hasad. Now at this stage we might be thinking, well, maybe I don't really know what anger is. What is anger? How can anger cause envy? How is this related to hatred? I thought if you hate someone, that's when you get angry. Let's take a brief look at the nature of the word in the Arabic language. So linguistically, the word for anger is ghadab. And ghadba is a sakhratu sulba. It's a dense, hard piece of rock. Very similar to the rocks that you'll get here in Scandinavia. It's not like limestone that crumbles. It's a very dense piece of rock, almost like granite. وَمِنْهُ اشْتَقَ الْغَضَبِ. And from this word, this is the word where the word anger comes from in the Arabic language. غضب. Tamam. Al-ghadbu is also a thawr or asad. It's like a bull or a lion, one of the names. So some of them even said it's the bit between the dry piece of skin between the two horns of a bull. Now, not that it's intrinsically related, but just in terms of isti'nas, it's interesting. Just have a quick look at the etymology of the word in English. So they say it comes from Middle English, which is anger, which means grief or pain. So the root of the word actually means some kind of grief or pain, trouble, affliction, vexation, sorrow, or wrath. And this comes from Old Norse. So the English word would have come from Scandinavia, which meant affliction or sorrow, which is where you get the word also angst from. To be in a state of angst, which is also, as I understand, is still a similar word today in Swedish. It's also related to the word which means regret. So if you look at the semantic field, it's all to do with remorse, pain, regret. And then they say if you go back further, it comes from the Latin, which is to squeeze or choke or vex. You feel vexed. The ancient Greek, to squeeze or strangle. It's also related to anguish, anxious. And they say perhaps even to the word ugly. They say it may be related to the word ugly. And it says that the word seems to have originally meant to choke or to squeeze. Now I just wanted to have a look, because once again we're defining a worldview, we don't want to misinterpret things. In the English dictionary, you've got the word anger, and one of the definitions for anger is a strong feeling of displeasure. A strong feeling, okay, of displeasure, hostility or antagonism towards someone or something, usually combined with an urge to harm. Okay. And they say it can also mean pain or stinging. So sometimes in English you can say it's a bit of an angry wound you've got there. It means it's not very pleasant, it's in pain. طيب. I thought it was interesting as well, once again, to position ourselves, to understand from an Islamic worldview how we understand what anger is. So much of this science is to do with accurate and authentic conceptualization of what you're talking about. Imam al-Ghazali considers it half of the cure. You have two parts to the cure. You have ilm, which you could say is an accurate and authentic conceptualization. People just, they race by it and they say it just means knowledge. I get it now. Yeah, anger, I get what anger is. I've grown up, I've seen what anger looks like. But do we know what a definition is? Do we know how it's understood? Once again, through the prophetic lens. Because if we don't, we're going to misdiagnose it. And we're going to prescribe things. And maybe we have anger within us. Because that's the things we'll get them to find out. We may have anger within us, but we don't manifest it. Is that still anger? So we need to understand this. So in terms of, from a place of Western psychology, anger is an instinctual emotional response from a real or imagined threat. And they have some interesting studies. I think I had, in terms of the real primal nature of the response, and what part of the brain it comes from, and before it speaks to the cortex, it can override certain things through certain chemical reactions, because it's to do with the fight or flight part of the brain. So it's almost internal within us, a ghariza. It's an internal reality within us, with every single one of us. And that's why the scholars, they say that you can't say that you can absolutely eradicate it. So you could say maybe, one way of seeing it, is it's to do with this innate, integral, almost instinct, capacity or tendency within the human soul. Okay? Ghadab. Now the Prophet ﷺ, he said, ليس الشديد بسرعة سراعة, that a person who's truly strong or a truly powerful person person of real power and strength is not the wrestler, not the fighter. ولكن الشديد من يملك نفسه عند الغضب. So profound. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Utitu jawami' al-kalim." I was given this ability to speak in this comprehensive way. It's very simple. So you could see that on one. Okay, that's just a definition of what it means to be strong. But it's also a definition of what anger is. So it's not the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the one that's truly strong is the person that completely eradicates their anger. It's the person that restrains their nafs. يملك نفسه عند الغضب. When that hijan, that kind of force within you starts to erupt, then you're able to not have self-restraint. And in the introduction to this chapter, also Imam al-Ghazali, he says that gives some certain insight, certain wisdom, certain things about the nature of anger. Frequent anger, meaning allowing oneself, not controlling oneself, not having self-control, harms the heart. It has a lasting effect on the heart. It's corrosive to the heart. If a person cannot control their anger and they just constantly let themselves get angry, actually it has a harmful nature to the heart and makes it feeble. So your heart becomes weak. It's not able to carry certain meanings, certain spiritual realities, certain understandings, not able to be moved. And look who comes up next, the shaitan. The shaitan gave strength over a person when they're in a state of anger. It's one of the best ways for the shaitan to really tasaytir, tasallut, to overpower a person, incapacitate them when they're angry, in the state of anger. Some of the people of Allah, they said that anger is the key to every evil. So what happens with the key? You place it in the door, you unlock it. If you take that key through anger, if you don't control yourself when angry, you place it in the door, and it's like Pandora's box. Every evil comes forth from it. One of the early Salaf also said the pinnacle of idiocy, complete stupidity, real peak of stupidity is harshness. It's a coarseness in your way of being. It's a form of stupidity. Why? Many reasons. Because it's ineffective, because it pushes people away, because it doesn't bind hearts together, because it's an exposure of one's own dry, dead state. It's the opposite to the way of the Prophet ﷺ. Altaf an-nas, the most gentle of people, the true gentleman ﷺ. Ar-rajul al-latif, altaf al-rijal, altaf an-nas. ﷺ. The pinnacle of stupidity is harshness, and its driving force, that which fuels harshness, is anger. So that's the thing. Somebody that can have this state of anger doesn't necessarily mean that they're in a rage all the time, in a state of fury. That's a particular manifestation of that state. But they can become harsh, hidda. They can be, and some of them will say, anger corrupts iman like sibr corrupts honey. Sibr is like, it's like from an extract from a plant that traditionally, if kids were like naughty, they'd put it in their mouth. It's just a very bitter taste. It's like a punishment. And it's known traditionally. They'd know this. It's like almost like a herbal remedy as well. But it's the kind of one of those tastes that children don't like. So that would mean something to a pre-modern Arab. Like, wow, that means something. I don't know how we'd use that now. The point being is anger corrupts, it makes it bitter, it makes your iman not sweet anymore. It doesn't flow. It's not a nice feeling. Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu would say Indeed, the one has truly achieved success, falah, who has been guarded from greed, caprice and anger, tama', hawa, like false inclinations towards falsity, and anger, ghadab. So if a person takes out those things from their heart, according to Sayyidina Umar, it's a person of success. Once again, a worldview. What do we mean? Success. Does that mean you get like more money? Does that mean you get higher status in society? Falah. Success with Allah. You become dear to Allah. You sort yourself out, everything gets sorted. The creator of happiness places that in your heart, and it ultimately leads to eternal success. That's what, when Sayyidina Umar talks about success. When we hear these words, we need to reflect. We need to think about these things. So the one that has true success, falah, like in the salah, hayya ala salah, hayya al falah, come to falah. What kind of, you're gonna give out money? Are they gonna give out, come back to a connection, back to Allah, which renews the state of the heart, places it in balance, places it in harmony. Greed, caprice and anger. And some of the pillars of kufr, of disbelief, they say is one of them is anger. One of the pillars of disbelief is actually anger. Meaning if you want to uproot, the realities of kufr in a heart or in a place, then you need to be a conduit to cause anger to dissipate, not a conduit to increase people's anger and rage and fury. All that's going to do is increase the kufr. La ilaha illallah. So if we look at the source, wisdom and reality, haqiqat al-ghadab, why is it there? As Imam Ghazali already said, it's there, it's been created in every single one of us. To some of us, that tendency, or that organ, that spiritual organ, it's not something you can see, but just so we can understand the heart, okay, I can see that within me, that has a particular function, the lungs have a particular function. See, anger is this kind of faculty within you that can be cultivated and it can be neglected. But its reality is actually, it's almost like a driving force within you. It gives you certain good qualities if it's directed in the right way. And if it's not directed in the right way, it can also become negative. So as with the general theme of all of the diseases or the ailments or the defects of the human body, there's always that harmonious balance. There's that perfect medium, which is ultimately what? How do we know what's good or bad? People say this is good, this is bad. According to who? According to what? Upon what balance? What scales? What you think? Maybe 20 years down the line you change your mind? Does that make it bad? What you thought was good? No, it's just la'ab. The whole point of life is just messing about. The essence and the epitome of harmony is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If ever you think, but I don't really understand, what does balance look like? Learn about him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How would he do it? That's him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And any movement away in accordance to its movement, to its distance, away from that balancing core and that center and that qudwa, that example, that's a form of imbalance. Now you can have different types of imbalance. Typically, people often will talk about anger as in its excessive imbalance, when there's too much excess. But in our worldview, you can also have a deficiency in this reality. So let's look at what it looks like if you have a deficiency in this instinct, if it's not been cultivated properly, not been placed in balance. So because we're talking about abstract things, it can be easier to look at some of the symptoms. So somebody that has an imbalance towards deficiency, like someone has an iron deficiency, that have certain symptoms. If you have too much, you'll also have other symptoms. Similarly with the diseases or the ailments of the heart. So a deficiency in this capacity, in this faculty, that's once again not been channeled, not been trained, not been cultivated, is it starts to lose any kind of attachment to principle, doesn't understand principles. It buckles at the slightest, confrontation to a principle. And this can lead, you can see how these things are intertwined. It can lead to, somebody being two-faced, for example. It's one of the ailments, the defects of the tongue. Imam al-Ghazali recognizes. Because you're not able to maintain principle in different dynamics and situations. Another one is that you're easily diverted and there's no focus. So if you have no focus on something, it's to do with a deficiency in this thing within you. Unambitious. And we're not talking about, some kind of cutthroat businessman type, and we're talking about himma. You have no himma. Little resolve. There's no determination in what you do. I'm going to see this through, I'm going to do this. Another one that Imam al-Ghazali mentions is a weakness in your disgust that you should feel when you see or experience something which is displeasing to Allah. That's actually a deficiency. So what's interesting in this, all this talk about we want to be peaceful people. It's nice to be peaceful. Kalimatu haqq uridu biha batil. It's a true word, but what's meant by it is actually erroneous. Because the furthest thing is that the prophetic way is passive, is negligent, doesn't have any proactive, encouragement towards engaging and interfacing with tyranny and oppression. What kind of deen is that if you're not going to be able to? But what Islam does offer is a perfect balance in the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So a weakness in that. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if one of you sees munkar, something which is displeasing, let them change it with their hand. Yeah. People are like, okay, let's go for it. Look at what the scholars of explanation of this hadith, they say. They say that's for a person that has authority within a land, some kind of governance. Not any Tom, Dick or Harry, else what you get is, complete chaos and vigilante violence, which can only lead to chaos for a society. So people take this and like, okay, yeah, I get what they're saying. No. You just see something wrong, you go and take it up with your fist? No. There is a certain kind of or with your tongue, if you're able to, if you're capable to, or with your heart, and this is the lowest part of Iman. So the lowest part of Iman is if you see something which you know is haram, it's not beloved to Allah, Allah does not like this, and you feel nothing in your heart, no disgust, no nothing, that's a weakness in Iman. One of the signs of strong Iman is that you love and you detest that which Allah loves and that which Allah detests. That's when you taste the sweetness of Iman. If you become impartial, whatever, it's just life, isn't it? You're desensitized. Your heart's been set off balance. No wonder we're not going to be able to experience something in the prayer if we allow those things and we become passive and impartial to those things. These things, those amongst the shuyukh, if you even inform them about something, they'd become physically ill for a week. Just like, subhanAllah. It's heavy on their heart because the implications of what that is, something which Allah is displeased with. So weakness in disgust and seeing haram. And also defending one's family. A person that doesn't have this, they don't have ghira. Ghira is a praiseworthy quality. It's like a positive jealousy. Too much of it is imbalance, once again. But for somebody not to have a protectiveness which is mediated, which is balanced, which is caring, which is loving, This is also an imbalance, and it comes from this thing. It also leads to like a loneliness and almost like a patheticness amongst people. People see it just, it doesn't stand for anything. You know? A man that stands for nothing will fall for anything. It's the same kind of thing. Now what's interesting now, because typically one would have thought you'd associate this from the other side of the spectrum, but we're still talking about what deficiency in this thing now. It says an inability to keep calm and composed when faced with challenges. That's to do with a deficiency in this quality. Once again, an inability or a weakness at best to keep calm and composed, to deal with the situation in a calm and poised way. And the final one we're going to mention here, which is really interesting, because it's almost so integral to this whole process. It's just really interesting. If you have a deficiency in this, it leads to an inability to engage in the process of working one's own ego and training it in the very first place. If you have a weakness in this instinct, in this default place, you're not able to re-engage. Why is that? Why? Because if anger is often it's something that people channel, feel the force of anger. You see it in the world. Everyone's experienced or been the recipient of some kind of form of anger. Now, if the prophetic way is to channel it ultimately back to oneself, which does not mean self-loathing, it doesn't mean to be some kind of narcissistic, or nihilistic self-hater. Doesn't mean that. Channeling it back to you in the right way, in the prophetic measure, taking oneself into account, calling oneself into account. One of our shuyukh, they said, I am on the side of the one who is against my ego. I'm on their side. That you see the way the people of Allah objectify themselves. They see themselves, I'm just a servant of Allah, I'm a slave of Allah. How can I objectify myself? It's just a form of basira, it's a form of inner sight. You can't see objectify yourself. Wait a minute, that's me over there. What did I say? Let me put it on the balance of the sacred law. Halal, haram, pleasing to Allah, despised by Allah. It's just me and my world and my, And that's what the prophetic model does, is it gives you this empowerment to take yourself out of your own nafs. And that's why there's always hope. Anything else, there's no hope, ultimately. Any other worldview. Because you're always going to meet yourself in the same place. I'm working on myself. Why? For the sake of myself. To reach myself. You can't reach anything higher. The purpose of the Islamic method, the prophetic methodology of refining the heart, is to refine yourself, not just so you have a refined self. It's so you can know Allah. It's so you can see things as they truly are. It's so you can experience closeness to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. La ilaha illallah. قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها. So there needs to be some kind of base element of this. Once again, it doesn't mean like, I need a bit of anger. He's giving me legitimacy. No, I'm going to go for it. I'm an angry guy. Saying I need it for the very essence of my saluk. Bismillah. La. I'm not talking about that manifestation which you've been dealing with. We're talking about this default capacity which needs repairing, it needs orienting, it needs channeling, it needs mediating. And if you have this and you work upon your own ego, it's one of the most courageous things. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said this. Man yamlik nafsuhu inda al-ghadab. That's a strong human being. That's the real fighter. They're going throughout the whole life and they're going against their own self. They're attentive to their own self. That's a real man. That's a real woman. Rijal Allah. Rijal Allah. So that's if there's a deficiency in this. What about if we go to the other side of the spectrum? To an excess in this? Well, we all know. Similarly as what happens with a deficiency, but for different reasons. You lose your principles. Blind rage. Didn't you believe this like 2 minutes ago? Now because you've been angered. No. And then what happens? You get all these weird things going in with the nafs. Give an example. Road rage. Someone does something to you, it's irritating, frustrating. It could have been a threat to you. And then you get angry, you start swearing, you start getting... And the irony is the person doesn't even hear you behind a screen and a window. And it's very strange psychology. There's no real benefit, but it's... Tashaffi just allows the nafs to get its fill. And then, were we to be confronted about that? Look at this principle. So, yeah, but these people, they just don't know how to drive. So, okay, so the reason why you got angry is your deep concern for people following the rules of the road. MashaAllah. Really? It enraged you that genuinely, that much, that people, did not use their indicator. SubhanAllah. It's a very moralistic kind of approach to road safety. In reality, it's to do with the nafs was put in a momentary place of agitation, didn't know how to process it, didn't know how to deal with it, so it lashed out. And we lost our principles for a moment there. We slipped up, we said a word, we said something. And we went through the defects of the tongue. So many of them are predicated upon this faculty within you, ghadab, anger. And if you're able to sever those places, those channels, if you're able to get less angry and channel your anger and understand your anger, then, it's going to leave backbiting. It's going to be much easier to control one's tongue, speaking ill of others. You're not going to be able to have to swear or use foul language, because you would have nipped it in the bud. At the very least, you become closer to understanding it. What's the motivating force behind what I'm doing? That's to do with consciousness. A Muslim is the one who's ultimately very conscious about what they're doing and what they're saying. And we all slip, because we're human beings. We're human beings. Kullu bani Adam khata'un. All of the sons of Adam make mistakes. And the greatest of those that make mistakes are tawabun, those that turn back regularly to Allah. Tayyib. So another thing is it leads to an irrationality and no logic in your behavior. Why are you doing this? Because you almost go out the flow of normative logic. Why are you doing this? I don't even know. Because I'm angry. It's not a reason. No logic in one's behavior. What happens also is you lose your inner sight and ability to perceive. So this is one of the spiritual effects of this excess kind of anger. You lose your basira, lose it. Becomes momentarily extinguished. Think about it. If someone's enraged, they're not going to be in a deep spiritual state with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a movement and an extinguishing of that consciousness. That's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about this inner light. It's not like a flick of a switch and it's kind of neon light inside your chest. We're talking about this kind of consciousness and ability to perceive. When this fuel of anger comes in, goes out. And that's one of the reasons why we act with no logic and no principle. Unable to heed advice. So if we look to the life of the Prophet ﷺ, he was never enraged ﷺ. We would never see fury in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. But he said about himself ﷺ, I do become angry, but I only become angry for the sake of Allah. This is what we'll get onto, inshallah, after we finish this particular session, this particular part of this session. Another thing is you become easily weaponized by the shaitan. Easily weaponized by the shaitan. The shaitan now uses you, like the play toy of the shaitan. So if you look at different things in our lives and in our world, There are many things that are just there to make people angry, to make you irate. Provocateurs, people that say one thing, send one hashtag, comment on one thing, and it starts to spread, because that is like wildfire. Anger is like this fire, and all it does is decimate and kill. And even after that, the only thing that happens after you've killed everything off and it's all, black and burning, the only thing that comes up is weeds. And it takes a long time, to recultivate that land and recultivate that space within the soul. Really wrecks and, ruins something within the soul. So it's one of the great tools of the shaitan. The shaitan loves that. So we know from the hadith that the shaitan literally runs in the majari, the channels, meaning the veins of the human being. So constrict the majari, these channels, these passageways of the shaitan, through fasting. That's why typically when we fast, sometimes it can be a kind of irritability. We just don't have the energy to be angry. Trying to, yeah. And then he says another thing is it makes one's inward state foul, which is the place where Allah looks to, which is one of the ways to stop anger also. To think how you're appearing now to Allah. Catch yourself before it's too late. You're getting angry and Allah's looking at you now. Makes your inner state foul and one's outward appearance ugly. People become all red and blotchy and their eyes become like some kind of monster. Their teeth get like an angry face is not a pleasant face. He says you lose your balance and appropriateness in speech. You're just going to say something, why did I say that? And you can never get it back. It leads to uncontrollable and foul and abusive language. So you can hurt someone badly. Often these things happen, these expressions can happen between those that you're very close to or live in close proximity to. If you look at the example of domestic violence, for example, it comes from, ultimately these things have not been worked on, they've not been taken care of. And it leads to a manifestation of just a rage, blind rage. Allah protect us all, inshallah. And then he says also it could even lead to disruptive physical behavior. Fighting, hitting, breaking, tearing. I'm going to shred this. And then you realize, I didn't need to shred that. I need that bank bill. I need this, whatever it may be, Allah. They don't do much on paper these days. Maybe somebody threw their credit card ceremoniously into the river, whatever modern version you look into. You're shredding something, you're finding, even hitting something. I mean, this is, no, a'udhu billah, we're not saying to do this, but there's a logic in hitting someone, you understand? You feel it's not the right thing to do, you understand? I'm not advocating this. But when you take your anger out on someone else, it's a projected thing. But the angry person doesn't even do that. They can hit something like an inanimate object and hurt their own selves. It's like hit the wall. Why did you smash something? And then you've just cut your hand. Ajib, yeah. It's just, there's no logic in it. Have you thought for a moment about what you were doing? Makes me feel better. Makes me, just leave me alone. It's my logic. This current state, there's no logic, Habibi. Without concern or care for consequences. That's what it does. Because it extinguishes this light, which causes you to act in irrational, illogical way, and it wipes away any care for consequences. And we're a deen which is rooted in awareness of consequences, in accountability. Everything you do, everything you say, you'll be accountable for, and you'll be held into account for before Allah. Every little thing was stood before Allah. Let so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, stand forth before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have their whole life shown before, like a video. See everything. Then he ends on a bit of a, well, it's not funny, I mean, but it's just so silly. He says it could even lead to like cursing inanimate objects or an animal. You know, stupid computer, seriously, like, yani. It's funny. I mean, it's funny for people watching on, but for the person engaged in that, it's a serious thing. Stupid phone. Well, I mean, stupid comment, but. And the effects on the heart for an excessive form of anger is hatred, hiqd. Now what happens is if you have this bubbling in the surface and you have no ability to actualize your anger, it can lead to a built-up trauma, which can lead to hiqd, which is hatred. So it comes from a place of, like, I want to retaliate, but I can't in the way that I see fit. So you get this hatred, and that can lead to just a dominant state. Dormant in the sense that you don't know it's there, you're unaware that it's dominant in the fact that it actually dictates a lot of your decisions or the way you view other people. You know, they look like this, and I think this, and I think that about them, and they do it for this. And it's got nothing to do with the reality of their situation, everything to do with this dormant state of unreconciled hiqd or hatred, which is born from some kind of past trauma. Envy. It's another thing. A'udhu billah, these are all really foul traits of the heart. But happiness at another person's downfall, yes. She didn't have to hurt them, tripped up themselves, instant karma, you know. I remember stuff like that. A'udhu billah, may Allah preserve us all. We were on a motorbike, the brother, outside in the rural part of Hadramaut, and the rocks were really bad, and then we stopped at the side of the road. I don't know what, maybe this guy was having a bad day or something like this, but he stopped over and started basically swearing and just mocking. We were like, we don't even know you, it's some random guy. And then he goes over on his bike, and miskeen, something happens and it falls and skids over on the road. And I felt like, you know, it's one of those moments, because it's like, yeah, well, instant karma. But our recognition of that's a disease of the heart. We don't want anyone to be, do you know what I mean, to downfall. The prophetic way is, you know, Abu Lahab digs a hole. Imagine someone actually does that. You know, I'm going to plan it out, I'm going to get a digger, you know, make a huge trap for you just to irritate you. It's not going to kill you, it's not going to harm you, it's just to make your life annoying. You get these kind of things, like neighbors from hell. You know, these people that they've got this vendetta, this unreconciled issue. You know, let me just, you know, they're like there in the blinds, just think, there you are. I've got, these things happen. We've got TV series about them, you know. But he goes out and he builds this hole and he falls in himself, you know. Now, how many of us would be like kind of, well, what goes around comes around, you know, taste of your own medicine. There is a subtle kind of, because it's like, well, you were going to do it to me and you made me angry. So the Prophet had none of that. None of that, because he was only angry for the sake of Allah. And being angry for the sake of Allah, he was trying to take this away from me. And I relinquish my rights in that regard. I forgive him. So he puts his hand out and, you know, extend your hand, oh Abu al-Hakam. Calls him by his true name, you know, his name, Abu al-Hakam. He pulls him out. So these people, he gets up, because he's all embarrassed. There's the nature of the nafs, he's just pure nafs. Abu Jahl. People these days digging these holes, these kids, they don't know what they're doing. He just built it like half an hour ago. Look at the difference of the two. Because you have these archetypes within the sunnah. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the example of perfect balance, the qudwa, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Similarly, he placed people around him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which are like the anti-hero, the complete opposite of the real villain of the nafs. This is what not to look like. This is what not to be. If you find any tashabbuh, any kind of resemblance to this is where you need to be. You're heading in the wrong direction. You look at the example of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. Somebody that in terms of that instinctual capacity was very strong. Like he wasn't somebody who could be walked over. He didn't have that temperament. He wasn't meek or feeble or, but kind of waqaf in the kitabillah. He would stop immediately at the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah says this. That's where I'm at then. This is where I stop. That's somebody that's يملك نفسه عند الغضب. That's why Sayyidina Umar became Sayyidina Umar. In time when he was, Amir al-Mu'mineen, head caliph of the believers, of the Muslims. As a man, he goes to his house. He knocks on the door to complain about some marital dispute that he's had, and he feels that his wife's spoken in a foul way to him, and he wants to get his right, go back to Amir al-Mu'mineen. Umar will put things right. He goes up to the door, he's just about to knock, and he can hear the wife of Sayyidina Umar shouting at Umar. He's like, okay, we've got something going on here. He starts to go. And because obviously the nature of the house is that you could hear someone coming up to the door. So Umar comes up, he goes, marhaba. He goes, what is it? He goes, don't worry about it. We're good. He starts to walk slightly further away. He goes, but like, tell me, like whatever it is. He goes, no, I came to complain. I had a bit of a domestic, but I can see you got issues of your own. And he says, Sayyidina Umar, he says, look, my wife, she takes care of me all day. She cooks for me. She takes care of me. Can I not give her a bit of leeway if I do something that makes her impatient with me? And that's the spirit of the law right there. So much of healthy marital love and mawadda is based upon the knowledge of the spirit of the law, not just the letter of the law. You need to know the letter of the law. But if you're just going to you have this saying now, a'udhu billah. I've heard this, like a lot of young people are getting married. I'm going to do this, I'm not going to do that. Good luck, yani. You're going to be divorced like a couple of months later. And I don't know about in Sweden, but in the UK, there's this frightening level of divorce just because people can't. Now there's times, khalas, and it's halal, and we're able to do it. But this is a big problem in our communities. La ilaha illallah. أبغض الرجال إلى الله الألد الخصم. The most hated of men to Allah. It doesn't say kham, it says men, which is interesting. Is the bickering arguer. Allah just hates that person, detests them. Because you're perpetuating this state, you're manifesting this state. Look how blind I am. Look how devoid of light I am. Look how untrained I am. Look how little I've done for my own nafs. Look how unprophetic I am. Me, that big me. A'udhu billah. Like, where do you think you bow your, you're the big guy? Abghad al-rijal. The most detested of men in the sight of God. Alad al-khasm. He's constantly bickering and arguing and just, A'udhu billah. Sadness at another person's joy. That's another thing. So if you can't be happy at someone else's harm, if that other person that you're hating on, this is like a cultural thing now. Haters. As in, like, it's a thing that we know. There's an archetype of human being which they are haters, expect to have haters. All of these diseases embedded with this kind of, unfulfilled tyranny. And we're the first people to say, look at these governments and look at these people and you, the Pharaoh within you, he's all good. He's become a Muslim. He's bowing. He's praying, prostrating. La ilaha illallah. So sadness in another person's joy. Oh, they just got a promotion. You're like, yeah. Well, it's nice for them, you know, and all these inside is, as you see where the envy comes in as well. It's related to the same thing. And a'udhu billah, these are just so foul. A desire to expose others. Yeah, we've got to dish the dirt on this person. Oh, did you happen to know that such and such a person is involved in this or does that? And it's done in all these like really horrible ways. That's a disease of the heart. Doesn't matter how you camouflage it. Doesn't matter how you dress it. It's foul. A'udhu billah. Now back to the place of harmony. Either extreme. The place of self-control. The prophetic balance. The way of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Sahaba only knew that he was angry when there was a vein in the center of his blessed forehead sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that would protrude slightly. Now the anger of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam once again was balanced. It was only for truth. It was governed by truth, and it was governed by principles which are innately true. There was no excess. So you'd never see the Prophet ﷺ viciously reprimanding someone. It'd always be mediated. If somebody did something that went against the sacred law, he wouldn't go into a state of rage, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. His anger would drive him to redress that wrong. But it was also imbued with immense wisdom. So it's not weakness. Sometimes I'm just going to leave it, I'm just going to neglect it. It's wise that we don't, nitpick. Sometimes that's an excuse for the nafs because of a deficiency of this particular state within the heart. Like the Sahabi that called at the back of the room asking for rukhsa to commit, extramarital, sexual intercourse. Imagine doing that in the majlis of the Prophet. We don't even get that. Imagine someone does that in a lecture hall, in a university, or in a boardroom meeting. It's just like, it's so left of field. It's everything. It's like how many things are wrong with this particular thing. But that you're there before khayra khalqillah, the one that was chosen by Allah to be the guide of all humanity, and you're coming out with that whopper. It's just like, what was going through your head? But alhamdulillah, jazallah khair, because all it did was expose further the beauty of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, can I have permission to do this? And what did the Prophet say? Do you think the Prophet would be like, it doesn't matter? A'udhu billah. He knew what was right. He knew what was wrong. He knew that he was mu'tamin. He was entrusted. He had a duty to fulfill, which none of us can understand. A duty that would break us. We don't understand what he's holding, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل, were this Quran to be revealed upon a mountain, you would have seen it just crumble, and it was revealed to the heart of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Every day he was carrying this, care for the ummah, until now, and on Yawm al-Qiyamah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It takes a lot to. He's got our back, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. What is that indicative of his reality? The ability to do that, the magnanimity. And that's what he was doing. So he calls out. And the first thing the Prophet ﷺ does is he calls him to come close. That was the anger of the Prophet ﷺ. If someone gets angry, they say, let's discuss this. It's like, no, you can't speak and you can't not speak. You can just let me speak. Okay, well that's not the manhaj of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. That's not his way. His way, come close to me. Keep connected. Keep it real. If something's diverged slightly here, it's not too late. And then he reasons with him in a gentle way, because his whole point is to get people back into a state of balance. La ilaha illallah. Anger management training session of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ya Umar calls upon Umar. Umar just shrinks and turns behind because all of these things that he's planted within him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Placing us, transforming this, place of imbalance into a place of well-being and balance. So in this, we've got to understand that in dealing with anger, it's not about suppression of anger. Kadham al-ghayz, you could say, is a translation of suppression of anger. But what it really means is a rechanneling. That's really what it's talking about. It's not like, there may be an element of suppression of the manifesting of that anger. So you don't lash out, or you don't say that word, or you just, yamlik nafsahu, let you take the reins of your own self. I'm going to keep it cool. But that place, it's not just left there. What we're talking about here is it needs to be rechanneled into something meaningful. So it's an effective control and channeling of that anger. And the Prophet ﷺ gave us a clear way to do this. There's some practical ways of how to do this. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. طيب. So one of the first things that is from the ulama, it's no doubt derived inshallah from that which they saw and witnessed through the sanad, is to make wudu. Once again, to cool down, to make wudu. Typically people become more irate when they're hot. It's a saying in English, you're hot and bothered, become angry. You just calm down, make wudu. And also to sit down. If you stood up, to sit down. Because one of the physical effects of anger is it can heighten one's blood pressure. Okay. Heightens one's blood pressure. Also causes not hyperventilation, but it's an excess in breathing. You get angry because it's to do with that primal part of the brain of, fight or flight. So the way to reduce that is to sit down. Place yourself back into a human balance. Don't behave like a predator. You're ready to pounce. Sit down. And if you sat down, to lie down. And then, which is mentioned in Sahih Bukhari, you say, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim." So you're doing two things there. You're actively making yourself aware, and you're actively seeking help. Allah, I place this in your hands. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Now all of these things, if you can see so far, this is to do fi halat al-ghadab, in the very instance of anger. And then this is blessed dua from al-Mu'mineen Aisha radiallahu anha. عن محمد بن أبي بكر قال كانت عائشة رضي الله عنها إذا غضبت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم يقول يا عويش قولي اللهم رب محمد اغفر لي ذنبي وأذهب غيظ قلبي وأجرني من مضلات الفتن. So beautiful, this one interaction. So if Sayyidah Aisha, if she ever got angry, the Prophet would just take on the nose like this. Because yeah, Uwaish, little Aisha, it's a nickname they gave to Aisha. Uwaish, it means like the little Aisha. It's so beautiful how to diffuse a situation. And typically what we do, and an example of dealing with angry people, is we meet fire with fire. Well, let me just, it's like wild animals. That's what they do. If you see lions in the wild, or gorillas, or like human beings shouldn't be like that. It's very different from someone being weak and calm. But if you're calm and poised, I'm going to fight fire with water. He said, yeah, Awaish. He just, no, Awaish, Aisha. Say, inshallah, we can have this dua put up on the various social media outputs, inshallah. Ya Awaish, قولي Allahumma Rabbi Muhammad. Oh Allah, the Lord of Muhammad. So you're connecting yourself. Oh Allah, by the Lord of Muhammad, the one I'm following, the one I'm trying to be like, the one. The Prophet knew it. He laughed and he said, I know when you're angry with me, Aisha. She said, how, Ya Rasulullah? He says, when you make dua and you're pleased when you say, oh Allah, the Lord of Muhammad. He says, well, if you're a bit angry with me, you say, oh Allah, the Lord of Ibrahim. She goes, yeah, it's true, Ya Rasulullah, I do that. Allahumma Rabbi Muhammad, oh Allah, the Lord of Muhammad, اغفر لي ذنبي, forgive my sin. وأذهب غيظ قلبي, and dissipate or cause to go, like get rid of the ghayth, the kind of the rage of my heart. وَأَجِرْنِي مِن مُضِلَّاتِ الْفِتَنِ, and save me or protect me from the misguiding manifestations of fitan, of tribulation. La ilaha illallah. Na'am. So if you can make wudu. If the wudu doesn't help, you can make a ghusl as well. The shuyukh recommend this. Sometimes if someone's really enraged, incensed by something, a wudu is, you're going to have to go and have a cold shower. Just cool down a bit. Cool off. Tamam? Yeah, mudillat al-fitan is to do with like things that send people astray, just kind of, yeah, waliyadhu billah. It's also recommended that you can to repeat this version, Allahumma adhib ghayda qalbi wa ajirni min mudilat al-fitan. You can repeat this 7 times. Repeat this 7 times. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So to make wudu or a ghusl, to sit down, cool off, seek protection from the shaitan, engage in dua, engage in dhikr. Because what's happened is you've become disconnected for whatever it is. One of the enemies without and the enemies within, from the shaitan or the nafs that's put you into this state. You need to re-engage. You need to understand that in this state now you're like drifting. You're hovering. You need to reconnect. You need to reroute yourself, and these are the ways to do it. Now, there are other things to do also. Time is obviously coming to a close. But there are things which we can do generally within our day. Actively tending to our prayer is going to allow us to be far more balanced in the way that we do things. That we're not just going through the prayer, we're constantly learning and deepening our experience of the 5 daily prayers. Starts off in that we know how to make wudu, we know how to make ghusl, we know what breaks the wudu, we know what breaks the ghusl, we know the sunnahs of the wudu, and we implement them. Same with the prayer. We learn the prayer properly, how to, from an authentic chain of sanad, of unbroken transmission back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this isn't just a one-off thing. Our shuyukh do this from the cradle to the grave, because we're constantly reminding ourselves of its importance. In the salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. It's a means for negation or dissipating fahsha, foulness, and bad action. So the prayer. Regular muhasabah, taking oneself into account, recognizing the deeper points of trauma. So, for example, someone's just mad at their kids because, I don't know, they slammed a door or didn't do their homework or, didn't take the trash out, whatever it may be. Is it really them? Is that the causational thing that's made that you angry? Or is it that something happened to you earlier on during your day? Or you're in a particular state of qabd. Sometimes these things can just come to a person and it's a part of Allah. You just feel constricted. You don't feel very happy and chilled and expansive, and you just feel a bit, in English you just say a bit grumpy. Maybe there's no reason. But the prophetic way is, because you're a slave of Allah, is you're able to objectify that. Okay, Allah, I recognize this is my current state right now. Bit turbulent, bit irritable. I'm not now going to cause other people to have to experience this of me. That's what you see with the people of Allah. They're not like, I'm just having a bit of an off day today. There's no off day with the people of Allah. And we should take solace in this, because the more that we try and cultivate ourselves in this, the more we'll be more balanced and rectified within ourselves. We can rectify. Tamam. To understand what are these base triggers. Like if you have a fragrance, it has different ranges in the notes. You have the high notes which come in the first spray or the first swipe or whatever. Then you have the medium notes. Then you have the base notes, which are those things which are, the molecular basis is bigger and it lasts for longer throughout the day. Sometimes we're just thinking about things on the surface level. We need to go deep and reflect and meditate. Why am I feeling this way? What are the reasons for it? So much of the rage of today's youth is just from a feeling of lack of fulfillment. I don't feel fulfilled as a human being. And the soul knows that. The soul is deeply aware. I'm not fulfilled. I'm not fulfilling my life as a human being. And you can try and, paste over it with intoxicants or distractions, but the soul can't lie. It's still in pain. If it's not going to be healed, it's still going to be in pain. So much of the rage comes from two things. A complete absence of understanding of the goal. What's the end goal? Why am I doing this for? Often it can be very nihilistic. No goal, just going to watch it burn. It's like the Joker from Batman. That's his thing. It's very devilish. Why? There doesn't have to be a why. There doesn't have to be a meaning. That's the essence of profanity in our understanding. If something is sacred, it's to render it purely for the sake of Allah and put it back to truth and what's real. Then profanity is just, why? Just, They don't know the goal, and they're not aware of the method. So people feel frustrated. I feel these things. I see tyranny. I see oppression. But I don't know a methodology and how to deal with it. So these things become diseases of the heart, become untended to, and they manifest in a whole host of different ways. La ilaha illallah. To remember your qudwa, your example. Be present with your qudwa. Bring your qudwa to heart. Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The closest of you to me in Yawm al-Qiyamah are the best of you in character. And if a person works on these channels of anger and it roots them and deals with them, then they incline towards having good character. And the closest of you to me on Yawm al-Qiyamah are those of you that send the most salutations upon me. Salawat, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. The more you're doing that, the more you're conscious of him. The more you're conscious of him, the more you'll be conscious when your behavior strays away from his way. So the two coincide. You're close to him because you're constantly remembering him. And through this also is a spiritual, mystical reality which comes from this. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. So be attentive to the triggers and be aware of some of these cures. Think about what Allah's said about the wrath of a human being, and what the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned, the merits of Kadhimin al-Ghayz, people that are able to subdue and rechannel this rage, to remind oneself, to sober up, yukhawif nafsahu, frighten yourself in the punishment of Allah. Okay, if I do this, if I go down this route, it's going to lead to some kind of outcome which I won't like. He also says to warn oneself about the consequences even within the world. Let aside the akhirah. If I carry on down this line, think constantly, do these things. If you feel this fuel of anger start to come in, remind yourself, what are the consequences for Allah, between me and Allah, between me and the creation, between me and my spouse, between me and my children? What are the consequences? Think. Get back into a state of consciousness. You'll think about how ugly you look when you're angry. He says you're similar to an angry dog, some kind of predator. And to seek protection from the shaitan, as we mentioned earlier. So there are two things: understanding an accurate, authentic, prophetic definition, understanding, conceptualization, what anger is. It's on a balance. There's an excess, there's a deficiency, and there's a perfect, beautiful balance. In order to reach that balance, we need to move away from the shaitan, move away from the ego, move away from distractions, and call ourselves, remind our souls, remind our hearts to be in that state of harmony and balance. أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. Is it not in the remembrance of Allah that the hearts find tranquility? The people of this tranquility will have their hearts conditioned in the remembrance of Allah, the remembrance of Sayyidina Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and start to cultivate this place within their heart, where they become people that are able to, in difficult situations, in challenges, in times of fitna, they're able to be people who are mediated, who are calm, who are poised, who are balanced, but also have a deep inner prophetic strength. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to fight effectively against our own selves and be conduits for change within ourselves, within our homes, within our families, within our societies, and for the entire ummah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us these teachings and these understandings to spread throughout the ummah, to know who our qudwa is, the one that we're following. We follow the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and no one else. We follow him in his behavior, and we follow him in his anger and his pleasure, and we follow him in his balance and his harmony sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We follow him in everything that which he called us to. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never sever the link that we have between us and between him, and connect us to him in our moments of difficulty. And if we forget, may we be caught in the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to constantly work against ourselves, to strive against ourselves, to have the courage and develop the courage to have strength to overcome these things within our souls, so these veils are removed and these distractions dissipate, and we become focused and engaged and ultimately able to receive from the gifts which only you can bear. Ya Allah, we ask you this, not that we deserve it, but because of who you are. So because of who you are, Ya Allah, don't veil us from the good that you have to give, from the evil which we harbor within our souls. Take us by the hand, remove the veils, remove these diseases, and place us in a place of well-being and balance and harmony. Allow us to follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in our behavior, and give us tawfiq. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.